Yeah, that's good. Hi, good morning, everyone.
Morning, Hindy.
Amazing. So nice to be back with everyone Thursday morning. Just want to say hi to everyone.
Hindy, do you know if last week's was recorded? I forgot to log on.
Yes, it was. It was.
Okay.
You can message Myra about that. Thank you so
great.
much, Myra, for setting this up.
Everything's been recorded. I just haven't gotten it all up to YouTube yet because we have like 10 classes a week now. So I'll get it done today or tomorrow before the holiday.
Okay, no rush. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Myra. Okay, good morning. So thank God, this is our 4th Elul class. And during the summer, we learned Pirkei Avot, and after the holidays, we're going to be starting a new curriculum. So we took the opportunity to actually delve into Elul and Rosh Hashanah and get prepared mentally and spiritually before Rosh Hashanah comes. So in this class, I'd love to approach the idea of prayer and what exactly we're going to be doing in Rosh Hashanah, in the Rosh Hashanah services when we come to Shul. And we're going to go through some of the regular prayers. We're going to go through the structure of the prayers, the shofar. We're going to talk about the significance of all of this. And step by step, we'll build an awareness and an understanding of the prayers of Rosh Hashanah and how the prayers of Rosh Hashanah are different than the holiday prayer, than the Shabbat prayers. And we'll come to Shul ready and ready to pray. So yesterday was a special day, so I want to point it out. Yesterday on the Hebrew calendar was the 25th day of Elul, which means that Rosh Hashanah is 5 days away. And the 25th of Elul is a significant day because the 25th of Elul was actually the first day of creation. So the day that God created light and dark, that was yesterday, the 25th of Elul, which begs the question, why, if yesterday was the birthday of the world, when God started creation, shouldn't Rosh Hashanah have been yesterday? The reason that Rosh Hashanah is in 5 days on the 1st of Tishrei is because if we remember the sequence of creation, there were 6 days of creation. On the 6th day of creation, animals were created, but man and woman were also created. So Rosh Hashanah is actually on the day that man and woman were created. And the message is that even though the world was created yesterday, and Rosh Hashanah is not marked yesterday, the whole purpose of creation is for mankind. And therefore, the birthday of the world, which is Rosh Hashanah, is marked on the birthday of man, not on the birthday of the light and dark or the vegetation or the water. The Rosh Hashanah is specifically on the day that man was created, which is very special. And it's one of the most central themes of Rosh Hashanah, that this whole world and this whole cosmic universe is created in order for us to be in partnership with Hashem. And we're going to see that coming up in many, many ways throughout all these prayers. Now, often we come to Shul, and I decided to address prayer because I know that prayer is one of the hardest things for us to do. And it doesn't matter whether or not you're experienced in prayer. In general, prayer is very, very difficult. And why is it so difficult? What is it about prayer that is so hard? And we all struggle with prayer on some level. And the reason is because we're very into exercising our minds. We love to exercise our minds. We love to learn more. We love to pursue knowledge. We're very into trying to grasp things with our minds. However, a lot of us don't know what it means to exercise our emotions. And we exercise our minds, we exercise our bodies, but exercising our emotions is actually the act of prayer itself. Because To exercise our emotions means to take stock of how we're feeling and to be emotionally vulnerable to God and ask God for everything that we need in life, everything that we want in life. And it's not so simple. It's not so easy, because what we're doing is we're trying to go deep into how we're feeling. We're trying to take a very deep dive into what's going on emotionally. And often a lot of us would love to just kind of ignore the complexity of our emotions, but prayer invites us to actually look into the complexity of our emotions. So engaging in prayer is engaging in an emotional exercise where we, number one, look at where we're holding. Number two, we express a desire for things to be better. And number three, we speak it to God, but God is not physically in front of us, which makes it very difficult. And a lot of us can find ourselves lost in prayer. However, I invite you to realize that on the Rosh Hashanah, on this, like at the services, there's going to be a moment where the chazan is going to be going on, and you might lose the page, you might lose the place of the chazan, and you're trying to follow the chazan as well as you can. But there's going to be a time where the chazan is silent, or you lost your place. And in that silence, approach God and realize that Rosh Hashanah is not only a day for you to show up to synagogue, essentially you're showing up to God. And we call Rosh Hashanah the Judgment Day. And we wondered, is God judging us? Is that what's happening on Rosh Hashanah? Are we being judged? None of us like to be judged. So what is it, Judgment Day exactly? And Judgment Day is often misunderstood as God is judging us and saying, oh, you weren't very good this year, or you were very good this year. Judgment Day is really God taking a spiritual stock taking, almost like God is our accountant or our finance, like our financial, what's it called? What's the word? Our financial advisor. And he's looking into our ledgers and he's saying, okay, this investment, did it work? Did it not work? It's something that we want to do again. God makes an investment in each and every one of us every single year. And when we come to Rosh Hashanah, we come to Rosh Hashanah in the mode of a partnership, that we're coming to assess our past year with God. We're coming to say, okay, what did this year look like? And what was accomplished and what wasn't accomplished this year? And God is essentially asking us, what the investment that I put in you this year, do you feel like you fulfilled it to your the ultimate? And it's very beautiful because God is asking, did you take care of the investment that I put into you? And it kind of flips the word judgment on its head as a day of compassion. God is, yes, judging our year, judging our past actions, judging what went down. But at the end of the day, he's doing it out of compassion. And he's asking us, do you feel like this year was good enough? And what can next year look like? And it's very, very beautiful because, like we spoke about last week, that the coronation of the British monarchs, the British public is there to serve the monarchs, but the monarchs are also there to serve the people. To make this comparison with God is difficult because God is an almighty king, but in a small sense, God is, yes, serving us. God is involved in a partnership with us where he wants the best for our year and he wants the best for us. And God wants to give us everything good for our upcoming year. And we have hopes and dreams. And God also has dreams that we don't even imagine for ourselves. And Rosh Hashanah is a conversation about the upcoming year as much as it's a conversation of the past year. So every single Rosh Hashanah, there is some sort of coronation that is happening. Rosh Hashanah itself is a coronation day. And there is Jewish thought and Jewish Hasidic thought teaches us that the world actually goes into a silent, comatose state on Erev Rosh Hashanah, right before Rosh Hashanah, before we begin Yom Tif, we go to the synagogue for the Mincha service and we're praying, and our year 5782 is ending. And the light and the energy and the vitality of that year 5782 is detracting. It's almost like an exhale. And then as Rosh Hashanah begins, there's an inhale of energy. However, this energy is new light that has never been present in this world before. That's what Hasidic thought teaches us, that every single year, besides for it being called a new year, is actually a new year because there's new vitality that is being infused into this year. And it invites us to take up like this opportunity and like take a hold of this opportunity and realize that this year is coming with so much freshness and so much newness. And that's what's so cool about Judgment Day and having Rosh Hashanah. God is always watching us, and God is always watching what we're doing with his creations, which is us. Like, what are we doing with God's investment in this world? And we are God's investment in this world. Rosh Hashanah is the day where we pause and we say, okay, there is a new opportunity to do things in a better way. So Rosh Hashanah, when we think of the word judgment, let's try to flip it in our heads as not only a day, not really a day of judgment, but a day of compassion. God is taking a hold and saying, okay, I want this upcoming year to have freshness and newness. And I want you to be invested in this year in a more exciting way. And every time we stop and we start something anew, it allows us to come and show up with a new perspective. And that's what we want to do on Rosh Hashanah. Now, the challenge of prayer is that, like we said before, prayer is the exercise of our emotions. Hold on a second, I'm just going to try to mute. Like we said before, prayer is the exercise of our emotions. That's why a lot of us find it so difficult to pray. And we are really doing a very vulnerable thing by praying. We are trying to access what's going on in our hearts. And then we have to develop the courage to actually express what's happening in a vulnerable way, talk about it to God. A lot of us, when we pray, it's like, we're not sure how to begin, how to start, but praying really comes from kind of washing away all of the cluttering thoughts that's in our heads. So let's talk a bit about a basic prayer meditation that we could apply to any of the prayers during Rosh Hashanah. So the first thing that we do is anytime you want to zone in to what's happening in Shul, the Rosh Hashanah experience, the prayers, the best way to do that is to zone in on one prayer and say, okay, this prayer is coming up. Let's say the prayer Ashrei is coming up, or the Shema prayer is coming up. Okay, I want to be focused in on this prayer. So the first thing that we do is, even though there's a lot of people in the room.
Did you find your buddy? Did you ever find your buddy?
Hi, I'm wondering how I can mute.
I wonder how many of your buddies are back there. Where'd he go?
Hi.
Where'd
Excuse
he
me.
go?
Is everyone able to please mute themselves? Okay, amazing. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's go back to a basic prayer meditation that we could apply with any prayer in the Rosh Hashanah service. So the first thing is that even though we're going to be surrounded by lots of people in Shul, there's a way to silence our minds. And a lot of times when we pray, because it's quiet time, we're busy making checklists in our mind, or we're busy thinking about other distracting things like, oh, did I do this? Did I do that? Oh, are the kids okay in the kids program? Or, oh, I'm a little thirsty, I'm a little hungry. There's so many little thoughts that we can get to. First, invite yourself to just declutter your mind and to really make an oasis in your brain. And there's many ways we could do that. You could think of a certain song that calms your mind. You can think of a certain scene that calms your mind, maybe like a soft pond or a waterfall, or you could even just visualize Rosh Hashanah. You could fixate on the ark and just think about Rosh Hashanah and think about, okay, what's happening here? However, whatever works for you, try to declutter your mind. The next thing is to try to tap into your inner essence, into your soul. Try to speak to your soul. And the best way to actually do this is to speak to yourself like your inner child. Now, this is a very, very popular therapy exercise that therapists prescribe, which is to, whenever you speak to yourself, try to speak to yourself the way you would speak to of the little kid version of you, because a more compassionate tone will come out. So when you speak to your inner essence, or when you speak to your soul, the way you do that is try to speak to yourself the way God would speak to you, which is full of compassion and love and understanding. And ask yourself, okay, how are you doing? How's the Rosh Hashanah experience? Try to tap into how you're doing and almost speak from a way of God speaking to you. Speak to yourself with compassion. So first thing, number one, try to declutter your mind. Second thing, try to think or meditate or speak to your inner essence, which is your soul. When you kind of zero in on your soul, realize I'm a neshama. Make these affirmations to yourself. I'm a neshama. I'm a piece of God. I am so much more than just myself. On Rosh Hashanah, when we are accepting God as our King, we are also accepting the inner divinity inside of each and every one of us, because God chose us and wants us to be here. And therefore, we are part and parcel on a mission with God. So accessing our soul or thinking about our soul is an emotional experience, because we are realizing that we are part of a way bigger picture. And that makes us feel something. What does that make you feel? Does that make you feel a sense of awe? Does that make you feel a sense of accomplishment? Does that make you feel pride? Does that make you feel small? You could check in with yourself and ask yourself these questions. Now, zero in on the prayer that's in front of you. Choose the prayer that you want to be focused on. So let's say we're coming up to the Shema prayer, and you clear your mind. You try to speak from a soul perspective, or try to access a soul perspective, and really focus on the words. Now, we're going to have prayer books that are English and Hebrew. And speaking in English, praying in English is very, very important, because it's essential to understand the meaning. However, the Hebrew words themselves are very, very holy. And if you can, for certain prayers, try to sing certain prayers in Hebrew, either with the help of the chazan or with your background knowledge of Hebrew. Try to speak certain prayers in Hebrew. And as you're speaking in English or in Hebrew, develop an awareness for these words that you're saying. Once you have understood these prayer, like the prayer, just the meaning of it, and gone through each prayer, each word step by step, after that, after you finish the prayer, then go into asking Hashem, okay, this prayer spoke about you could zero in on one theme of the prayer. For example, the Shema talks about loving God, right? And then let's say when you're finished Shema, you could just breathe out and say, okay, God, I really want a year where I could feel uninhibited love for everyone and for you and for other Jews and other creations. And you could end off each prayer just with asking God for something personal that's connected to the meaning of this prayer. So that is in general how to exercise your emotions. Exercising your emotions begins with like making like a clearing in your brain, just clearing out your mind, speaking to yourself the way God would speak to you with compassion and with a positive perspective, narrowing in on the meaning of the prayers, because each one of these prayers was composed by rabbis and sages many, many years ago. And we could ask ourselves, okay, why don't we just speak from the heart? Why do prayers have to be scripted? And the reason that prayer is scripted is because there's so much that we want to communicate to God. There's so much we want to ask of him. And a lot of times it's very difficult to just muster the words. And these prayers, in every single one of these prayers, they cover every single blessing that we want for ourselves. Every single prayer covers all of the praise that we want to speak to God, all the blessings that we want in this upcoming year. It's almost like prayer covers all ground. And now our job is to find ourselves in the prayer. So I want to go through the structure of Rosh Hashanah prayers, what it's going to look like, and just for us to be prepared. So the prayers are very similar to the ones on Shabbat. During the week, we have a regular basic prayer. On Shabbat, it's going to look similar but different. There's going to be additions. And then on holiday, there's going to be even more additions. That's why Rosh Hashanah services are so long. It's like a Shabbat service, but extra. And weekday prayers are shorter than Shabbat services. So the prayers are always building on each other, and there's always the basic body of the prayers. So we know that in Judaism, we pray 3 times a day. On Yom Kippur, we actually pray 5 times a day. There's Ma'ariv, which is the evening prayer. That's what we're going to begin Rosh Hashanah with. And then there's Shacharit, which is the morning prayer. Within the Shacharit, there's a prayer called the Musaf. Now, the Musaf, where does that come from? During temple times, on special occasions like holidays and Shabbat, there was an additional offering, an additional sacrifice. So in today's day and age, because we don't give sacrifices, we actually substitute with prayers. So there's an extra prayer that corresponds to an extra sacrifice that was given in the temple on holidays. And then we have an afternoon prayer called Mincha. And then we start the cycle again because there's 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. So we do the evening prayer, the morning prayer, and the afternoon prayer. Now, on Yom Kippur, we actually have an extra prayer called Ne'ilah, which is the closing of Yom Kippur. And all of these prayers, it corresponds to different levels of the soul. And every single prayer has either verses from Psalms or verses of praying and blessing God. And you'll see a combination of these things. You'll see that some prayers are beseeching God for prayers, and some prayers are praising God. So let's begin of how the basic structure is going to look. So there's always the morning prayers, the early morning prayers, and the early morning prayers are going to be identical to the prayers that we have during the week. There's Baruch Sha'amar, we have the prayer Ashrei, the prayer Yishtabach. These are prayers that we say actually during our weekday as well. So the beginning is going to be very similar to a regular Shabbat or a regular weekday. And then we come up to the Shema prayer. The Shema prayer is the most essential prayer in Judaism, and it's actually 3 separate prayers. The first one we're most familiar with speaks about loving God with all your heart and soul. The second paragraph of Shema talks about transmitting Judaism to our children, to our next generation. And then the third paragraph of Shema talks about the mitzvah of tefillin, and by extension, the mitzvah of the tzitzit and the mitzvah of mezuzah, basically writing and fixing God's presence all around us.
This is not working.
Now,
This is not working.
then we come to the Amidah. The Amidah is very important because this is a prayer we ask God for everything that we need.
It's been here. What?
I'm wondering if I could ask.
Hi, Larry.
us
What did you
to
say?
please-
Carlos, what?
We need to restart it.
No,
You
I,
want that to you be.
no,
Hi, I
it's
wonder
been every
I could ask
lecture
someone
I've had
to
this week.
mute your microphones.
Okay,
Are
I
you able to
can't,
mute?
all right. Did Larry need anything? It's on 100%, so.
Hi. Wondering if I could ask everyone to please mute your microphones. Let's just do a check to see if everyone's muted. Perfect. Okay, amazing. Thank you. So the Amidah is one of the most essential prayers of Judaism. We take 3 steps back and 3 steps forward. And the reason for that is because, just like we said before, how we try to clear our minds before prayer to make an oasis to allow a conversation for God in our minds. We do that with the Amidah. We're taking 3 steps out of our mental space where we are now, and we're going into a new mental space, taking 3 steps forward into a conversation with God, which is so beautiful. Then we have the repetition of the Amidah. The Chazan is going to repeat the Amidah. At this point, we're silent. There are certain verses that we say along with the Chazan, but we are just participating along with the Chazan. What's fascinating is that on the high holidays, the Chazan has a special prayer where he asks God and he prays to God, if may I be worthy to represent this entire congregation, which is very powerful because the main person who's doing the most of the praying on Rosh Hashanah is the Chazan. And there's going to be times where we're silent, the Chazan is singing, and we're able just to be silent, and that is where we can meet God. Don't ever forget that even though praying is important and meditating is important and thinking about God is important, in those moments of silence, that is where we could truly meet God, and we could just relax into our relationship, into our thoughts and our wishes for the upcoming year. After the repetition of the Amidah, which is going to look different, the Amidah and the repetition of the Amidah are going to have specific prayers connected to the meaning of Rosh Hashanah. So you're going to see a lot of, God, please inscribe us in the book of life. You're going to see a lot of, God, please remember us, all the good things that we did this year. All of these things are going to be present in the Amidah. The Amidah is going to look a little different during Rosh Hashanah. Then we come to the Torah reading. And the Torah reading always has 2 parts. There's the Torah reading and there's the Haftorah reading, which is basically a part from the prophets, a story from the prophets that's similar to the Torah reading. So on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, we're going to read the story of Sarah and how Abram's wife Sarah was barren and was blessed with her son Isaac. And then we read the story of Hannah. Hannah is a story from the prophets of a woman who's also barren and prays to God for a son as well. Sorry. Okay. Now, what's the idea of these stories of these barren women having children? How do they connect to Rosh Hashanah? The reason that these stories specifically connect to Rosh Hashanah is because when a barren woman is blessed with a child, it's the idea of opening a new channel of blessings for her that was not present before. On Rosh Hashanah, this is exactly what we're asking for. We're asking God for blessings that were not necessarily intended for us. We're saying, God, this past year has been difficult for certain reasons. Please open up a new channel of blessings. Everything should just switch in a way more positive direction. And that mirrors what Hannah and Sarah were asking God for. And on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, we're going to read about the Akedah, which is one of the most deep and intriguing stories of the Bible. We're going to read about how Isaac was almost sacrificed by his father Abraham until God calls out through the help of the angel, no, do not sacrifice Isaac, sacrifice this ram instead. And then we take these ram's horns, and this is where the idea and concept of shofars come from. And then the Haftarah is a portion from the prophet Jeremiah talking about how God loves his children. So throughout Rosh Hashanah, there are so many themes of love and compassion that we'll see present in all of the prayers. Now, after the Torah reading and the Haftarah reading, that is when we have the Musaf. The Musaf is going to be additional prayers that are also, a Musaf is in the Amida kind of format. It's going to look similar to the Amida, and it's going to have extra Rosh Hashanah prayers. Then we have the conclusion with Ashrei and Aleinu, and then there is Kaddish. So let's zero in on some of the prayers that are very different throughout the year, in this time. So in the beginning, the prayers are going to look very similar to a Shabbat or a weekday prayer until we come to this one prayer that's called Hamelech Yoshev. And you might notice that in your machzor, the word Melech, king, is going to be very, very bold. And on Rosh Hashanah, we say Hamelech Yoshev. On Shabbat, we say Hamelech HaYoshev. Grammatically, that means that the king today is sitting in the present. And what we're saying is that we're summoning the entire congregation, saying the king is sitting right now on his throne. Today is coronation day. Today is Rosh Hashanah day. And there's a very deep story that there was a Hasidic rabbi that every time he came up to this portion of the prayer, he would faint. And when he would wake up from his faint, he would say a certain line that goes like this. He would say, if the king is here, why haven't I come until now? And the idea of this is that this comes from a story in Tanakh that there was a Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, there was a rabbi whose name was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who met Vespasian. And Vespasian had just become king. And when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai came to greet Vespasian, he said, "Greetings, my king." And Vespasian said, "If I'm king, why did you only come now? Why didn't you come earlier?" And the Hasidic rabbi would basically say that today is Rosh Hashanah, God is our king. God could be accessed on every single day of the year. If God is our king, why do we only come on Rosh Hashanah? It's basically just a deeper idea that even though Rosh Hashanah is the beginning and the birthday of the world and the day where we ask God for everything, there's always an opportunity throughout the year to ask God for everything we need and to approach God like our king. So that's the whole service begins with that. There's going to be a prayer that the cantor says. The cantor specifically says a prayer that is going to go along, the meaning is going to be like, okay, God, I'm beseeching this, like you on behalf of this congregation. Please allow me to take on this responsibility with a good heart and a good mind and a good soul. And then we are also going to talk about the Avinu Malkeinu. Now, Avinu Malkeinu is a very powerful prayer, very emotional, and it is going to cover almost every single prayer that we want for ourselves in this upcoming year. And then we have the shofar blowing. Now, the shofar blowing is very, very powerful because there are three different cries of the shofar. There's the tekiah, which is like one burst. Then there's the shvarim, which is 3 medium blasts, and then there's the teruah, which is 9 blasts. And these cries of the shofar, the call of the shofar, is supposed to mimic the cry of the soul. That first the soul calls out, the soul is in pain, the soul wants to be in a better place, and the soul makes a cry, a long cry. And then the soul is continuing to cry and it can't keep up this extended cry. And it makes 3 broken cries. And then the soul goes into a deeper level of crying, 9 levels, like 9 little cries. And then when we have Tekiah Gadola, that signifies the kind of cry that doesn't have a voice or doesn't have an expression. It's just always there. And the shofar is the time where we're able to just zero in on what we want in this upcoming year, the cry of our soul. And there's actually 10 reasons that we sound the shofar at Rosh Hashanah. So I wasn't going to remember all of them, so I'm just going to read them to you. Number 1, what are the 10 reasons that we blow the shofar Rosh Hashanah? First reason is that we are appointing God as our king. And the shofar is an instrument that's been used by the Jewish people for thousands and thousands of years. When the Jewish people went to war, they used shofars. So it's like an instrument, like a trumpet, coronating God as king. The second reason is that it calls us and reminds us to do teshuvah this year. The third reason is that it reminds us of Har Sinai, because on Mount Sinai, the shofars were sounded. The fourth reason that it reminds us of our prophets who used shofars, and a prophet was always present within the Jewish nation to remind the Jewish people to repent. So it reminds us of our great leaders that are beckoning us to repent and to do teshuvah. The fifth reason is that it reminds us of the destruction of the temple, and just the sound, the very harrowing sound of the shofar reminds us of where we are standing as Jewish people without a temple and our hope to rebuild the temple. It reminds us, number 6, too, of the story of the Akeza, of the binding of Isaac, because at the end, Isaac wasn't sacrificed, a sheep was sacrificed instead. The 7th reason is that the power of the shofar is that the sound makes us in awe and aware of God's presence. The 8th reason is that it reminds us of Rosh Hashanah itself, that Rosh Hashanah is called a judgment day, and we use shofars on Rosh Hashanah. It builds an awareness that, today is Rosh Hashanah, it's actually happening right now. And the 9th reason is to remember when Mashiach comes, Mashiach is going to sound a shofar, which is going to ingather all of the Jewish people, all the exiles to the land of Israel. And the 10th reason is to remind us that when Mashiach comes, there is going to be a resurrection of the dead as well. Besides for Jews coming all over the world, there's going to be all of our loved ones are going to be reunited with us once more. And during Rosh Hashanah, and specifically during the Musaf prayer, there's 3 modes of prayers. The prayers of Rosh Hashanah fit into 3 different themes. The first theme is called Malchiot, which means kingship. These are prayers that are addressing God as being coronated as king. The second prayers are called Zichronot. They're remembrance prayers. They're prayers that speak about Jewish history. They speak about Abraham, they speak about Isaac, they speak about Jacob. And we're basically telling God, we're your chosen nation. Above all, we're coming to Rosh Hashanah not only as your children, but as your chosen nation. You chose us as your children to be your nation. And you've had a history with us, God. You know our forefathers. And we're asking God to remember Jewish history and everything that we've been through. And then the last section of prayers is going to be prayers that are connected to the shofar, to beseeching God with the shofar and the importance of the shofar. Now, one of the most beautiful explanations of the shofar is the shofar, the shape of the shofar itself mimics the cry of the soul visually. The shofar starts out as being a very, very small, narrow hole and tunnel, and then it gets wider and wider. And one of the things we say when we blow the shofar is that We say, from my depths, I cry out to you, God. We're telling God that we are coming from a very, very small and broken, a small emotional state. And when we cry out to God, our voice projects outward, heavenward, towards God in a more open way. So when we're crying out to God, when we're calling God, we might feel, oh, I'm so small. Is God even listening? But remember that the shape of the shofar itself teaches us that we might be calling to God from a small place, but our prayers magnify when they come up to God. In front of God, our prayers are important and they are big and they are very, very magnified before God. So the idea of the shofar is that we're calling out from a small place, but it's reaching a high place. It's just growing, kind of like the shape of the shofar. And we use a ram's horn. And the ram is known to be a very soft, patient, docile kind of animal. And this animal, the ram, is very similar to our souls. Our souls at their essence are very pure, it's like a sweet animal or a sweet child. Our soul is sweet and pleasant and patient and beautiful. And when we hear the call of the shofar from the ram, we are trying to remember that we have our personality and we might label ourselves in whichever way we'd like. We could say, okay, I'm this kind of personality, I'm more rough or I'm more soft, or whichever way you label yourself, your soul is like a pure, beautiful, sweet child or ram, where there's no faults, there's no problem, there's no anxiety, there's no trauma, there's just your soul, just an essential you, an essential oneness. And the shofar, actually, the horn is actually like a bone. It's not flesh, it's not skin. The horn is really a bone material. And the word bone in Hebrew is etzem. Etzem means the essence. So in Hebrew, a lot of words have double meanings. The word etzem can either mean bone or it can mean essence, teaching us that the shofar is the call of the shofar is trying to tap into the essence of our soul. When we zero in and think of the shofar's message, the shofar is almost like a background noise that invites us inward. It's a background noise that helps us think about, okay, today's Rosh Hashanah, and many of us have so many memories going to shul, hearing the shofar year after year after year. We associate the shofar with Rosh Hashanah and the beauty of Rosh Hashanah. And this year, I would love to challenge everyone that during the call of the shofar, try to think of a new kind of idea for Rosh Hashanah that you have. A lot of the times in the past, Rosh Hashanah might have been an intimidating day. It might have been a judgment day. It might have been a very, very big day. And when you hear the shofar, I invite you to think about that. Yes, Rosh Hashanah is a very big day and it's coronation day and it's special and it's important. But today is also the day where I am calling out to God. And it is a day where we are conversing about the upcoming year. And when we hear the sound of the shofar, we are asking God to please give us a year of compassion, a year of mercy. And the shofar is an essential time for us to lock our minds into our conversation with God. Now, there's another prayer that I want to speak about. This one is called the Nisan Tokef. It's a very, very daunting prayer, and it's even a little bit scary. The meaning of this prayer is who by fire, who by plague, basically saying that there's a fate that as humans we could experience. We could experience plague, we could experience sickness, we could experience ailment, and today is the day where God decides that for us. Wow, very, very crazy prayer. It's like, this is so, so deep and very like almost daunting. And I want to give you a bit of the background story where we can understand the meaning of this prayer and where this prayer is coming from. Now, thank God we live in very relaxing and comfortable times. But when we come to Shul and Rosh Hashanah, we have to remember that the weight of Jewish history is on our shoulders. We're coming to Shul with the stories of our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents. We have been celebrating Rosh Hashanah since the times of Abraham. And the story of Nisan Tokef, of this prayer, is that it was written by a rabbi whose name is Rabbi Amnon of Mainz. Mainz was one of the main centers of Ashkenazic Jewry in Germany. And these Ashkenazi Jews were always at the mercy of the government. And the story has a lot of details, but in brief, the leader of the community was Rabbi Amnon of Mainz. And a lot of times the Christian scholars and the Christian governors or ministers would try to debate and have conversations with these Jewish rabbis. And they had this conversation, an ongoing theological conversation with Rabbi Amnon of Mainz. And they said to themselves, how cool, how great would it be if we got such a brilliant rabbi to convert to our religion? And they tried to ask Rabbi Amnon if he would convert to Christianity. And they tried relentlessly to convince him to convert. And at first he was silent, at first he didn't say anything. And then at a certain point, they were just berating him so many times with convert, convert, convert. He says to them, give me some time, give me 3 days, just think about it and I'll give you back an answer. Now, on his way at home, Rabbi Amnon thinks to himself, oh my goodness, did I just say that? Did I just say that I'm going to think about it and I'll come back to you later? And Rabbi Amnon became very, very disturbed with what he said. And he became very, very guilty and upset at himself for even expressing that. Rabbi Amnon said to himself, of course, the first thing I should have said was, no, I should have not avoided the subject. I should have not tried to say, give me more time. I should have given them a blank statement of, no, I'm never doing this. And Rabbi Amnon actually became like very, very sick and very, very sad and depressed, literally physically depressed from from the fact that he said this. And he stayed home and he didn't come back on the third day. He was literally sitting at home and in a sadness and in a depression over the fact that he said this. Anyway, the governor's ministers come to his door on the third day and they say, why didn't you come back? And Rabbi Amnon said, I didn't come back to the governor because I don't want you, the governor, to decide my fate. I want God to decide my fate, not you. I don't want to be in your hands. Anyway, they dragged him to the governor, and Rabbi Amnon repeated this to the governor. He said, I didn't show up to you because I don't need to show up to you. I don't need to be accountable to you. The only person I need to be accountable to is God. And therefore, I don't care what you do to me because God decides my fate, not you. And Rabbi Amnon actually said, you could punish me. I know you're going to punish me with a horrendous punishment. So I suggest that, Rabbi Amnon says this himself. He says, I suggest you cut off my tongue because my tongue said something that goes against what I wanted, goes against my nature. My nature is that I'm always going to be a Jew no matter what. And my tongue deceived me and said otherwise. Therefore, cut off my tongue. And the governor says, no, I'm not going to cut off your tongue. Now, this is very barbaric because we're talking about 11th or 12th century Germany. The governor says, I'm not going to cut off your tongue. I'm actually going to cut off your hands and your toes because you didn't show up to me on the right day. And the governor actually cut off one finger, one toe at a time, basically giving Rabbi Amnon a chance. Are you sure you don't want to convert? Are you sure you don't want to convert? And with this torture, this is how he kind of gave it, so to speak, to Rabbi Amnon. Anyway, a couple days later was Rosh Hashanah, and in those days there was no medications, there was no anesthetics, there wasn't anything that was going to relieve Rabbi Amnon of his pain, and it was pretty much known that Rabbi Amnon was going to die within the next couple of days. Rabbi Amnon comes to the Rosh Hashanah prayers in a chair, in a wheelchair, and he's brought up to the ark, and Rabbi Amnon composes this prayer. In this prayer we say until this day, the Nisan Tokef, and then shortly after Rabbi Amnon passed away. And the theme of this Nisan Tokef prayer is that we are remembering that Rosh Hashanah is, yes, an important day. It is a severe day. It is a day where our fate is in God's hands. And that is very powerful and very potent, but at the same time, we are the living reality and the living proof that God continues to sustain the Jewish people. At a time of Rabbi Amnon's period, it was very, very, very difficult to be a Jew. It required a lot of sacrifice. And today's day and age, it also requires sacrifice. But we are living in different times, thank God. And I think that living in these times allows us to approach Rosh Hashanah not only from a solemn place, but also from a place of love and a compassionate perspective on the Rosh Hashanah prayers. Now, just to wrap all of this whole discussion up about the Rosh Hashanah prayers, is that there's an order to the prayers, there's a structure, there's the morning prayers that most of us are going to be present for. There is the structure of praying. We're also going to have a sermon. We're going to have shofar blowing, and then the Musaf prayer. And now within that, there's many different themes. There's the three main themes of shofar, kingship, and remembering Jewish history, remembering our past. And throughout these prayers, we're able to zero in on the meaning, focus on the meaning of these prayers, and insert our own prayer as well. So the takeaway I would love for the takeaway of this class to be that when you are reading the prayers on Rosh Hashanah and having a conversation with God during these prayers, prayer is an exercise of our emotions. It is the exercise of the heart. And within each one of these prayers, we can all pick out a blessing that we would like for this upcoming year. So, for example, in the prayer of the Shema speaks about love. We could ask God for something connected to love. Or in the Amidah prayer, there's a part where we're going to say, Zachreinu l'chaim, remember us for life. And we could each pray to God about a prayer connected to life that's personal to us. There's always a way that we can look at each prayer and make it personal, because at the end of the day, prayer is personal. So I just want to wish everyone a beautiful Shabbat, the last Shabbat of the year. And we'll be seeing each other very soon on Rosh Hashanah. One of the things you could do before Rosh Hashanah is flip through your machzor. And we spoke about bookmarks last week. You could make bookmarks about inspirational ideas that will inspire you along the way during Rosh Hashanah. And there's a lot of meanings on each one of these prayers, a lot of stories and a lot of perspective on each of these prayers. If there's a certain prayer that intrigues you, you could look it up online and see the whole story of this prayer. And some of the machzors actually have the stories that are connected to each prayer. And yeah, I would just want to wish everyone a Shana Tova and a beautiful, healthy, happy year ahead. And we'll see each other in Shul and Rosh Hashanah. And this year, our praying should be really, really wonderful and should ascend on high and should be fulfilled in the best way possible. And if anyone wants to make any comments about praying on Rosh Hashanah, and any ideas. I invite you to unmute and you could share. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.
Thank
Shana
you.
Tova.
Thank you.
Shana Tova. Have an amazing, amazing year. And we'll see each other. We'll see each other soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
See you. Shabbat shalom.